This is your chart ruler. Now, this is your video about chart rulers. Okay, now if your chart ruler...
Screw it, I already did it on TikTok.
Do you know what your chart ruler is? Your chart ruler is the ruler, the planetary ruler of your rising sign or your ascendant sign in your full-on natal chart. Your rising sign tells you your personality, who you are, what you look like. That chart ruler, so the planetary ruler of this area, is going to tell you how that plays out in your lifetime. What is the most important thing for you? So here's my rising sign right here. It's Pisces. Neptune is the ruler of Pisces, so I can see that it's in the 10th house. Your chart ruler might be in the 11th of influence and friendships, or the 5th of creation and fun, or the 6th of doing your chores. Hi guys, it's Alyssa, and welcome back to another daily video on my channel, The Divine Venus. You guys have been unanimously asking me for a chart rectifying video. This is not gonna be that. But before I can put out a chart rectifying video, I need to put this video out because this video is really, really important when rectifying charts. And I don't want to bog down the chart rectification video with all of this information, so I'm going to make it separate. So if you know your birth time, this is a perfectly acceptable video for you to watch. And if you don't, I'm going to show you how to use this video to help rectify your chart. So just a little aside for anyone rectifying their chart right now. If you believe that you have like a Libra rising, that just is making a lot of sense as you go through rectifying your chart, you have to see if Venus plays out in a house that makes sense to you. If you don't know anything about chart rulerships, I'm going to help you out. We are going to go through another stroll down Astrodience or astro.com. I literally call it astro.com all the time. I don't call it astro. I don't call it Astrodience. I'm like, astro.com? You mean astro.com? Astro.com? Like, we could take a shot how many times I'm going to tell you guys astro.com. If you're following along with any of my videos, this is where I'm always going to send you because it's free and you can get everything in here. So go to astro.com and log in, or you can make a guest profile if you want to. It's not a big deal, but in order to find where your chart ruler lies, you do need to look at the actual natal chart. I'm sure there's probably like some app that will tell you, but I don't know those apps. I don't have any apps. You guys always ask me like CoStar and all that shit. I'm like, I don't know. I've never used it. I just go on astro.com and that seems to fulfill my needs. Okay, so we're gonna go to the extended chart selection here and we're gonna choose myself and then we're gonna click here to show the chart. So here is my chart, okay? And you can see in my chart that I have my rising in Pisces. So the ruler of my chart will be Neptune. Hey now, I don't care what type of astrology you practice, but I do want you to know that when I'm telling you stuff, I'm going to tell you the way that I know it and the way that I read it, because otherwise, why would you learn from me over somebody else? If you want to read a chart a different way, go learn from the person you want to read like, right? So when I'm looking at chart rulers, I am not going to dismiss Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto. I really believe in progressive astrology, which means that when we discover a new planet, I believe that we are consciously affected by it and we are growing as a consciousness. So that means that Neptune is now a part of us in a strong scale where we can now fully understand the veil of deception that's been over us for so many years, where we can actually see the sky as we understand what Neptune's been doing to us. Same with Uranus and same with Pluto. We found these, we discovered them, we can now see them because of technology with telescopes, where before astrologers were just using their eyeballs, we were eyeballing the planets. Now we can actually discover things that are further away. I'm going to use these in my practice because that's how I believe astrology is progressed. So that little side rant, because you guys always asked, I don't care if you don't use the outer planets, but I'm always going to be using them because that's the type of astrology I practice. So many people just look at their astrology and they say that this is the way that it's gonna be, and it's like so weird. I don't want to fall into that trap. I might fall into that trap a little bit to troll other astrologers, but I literally cannot stand how close-minded astrologers can be when it comes to their personal practice versus another. These are not like religions. Like, we don't need to be fighting over the one God. We can basically all practice what makes sense to us and interpret based on that. The fact that anybody would just throw out an entire study of astrology because it's more progressed than theirs is weird. Just like I wouldn't throw out theirs because it's more regressed. Okay, I'm trolling. Let's get through this. Okay, so I have a Pisces rising. So we look for the glyph of Neptune because Neptune rules Pisces. And as you can see, Neptune is 0 degrees conjunct my midheaven at 28 degrees Sagittarius. Okay, so this is my chart ruler. In this little thing, because I created this for you guys in my last video, I also have Marilyn. You can see she has a Leo rising and her chart ruler is 10 degrees Gemini, which falls right on the line to the 11th house. So you would read it in the 11th house. So she has her chart ruler in the 11th. And now I'm going to go through each one of the rising signs and tell you what your chart ruler is based on that, so that you can see the glyph as well. If you are like opening up your own chart and you're following along and you're just so lost and confused by all the glyphs, by all the planets, I want to help you here. So we're going to go step by step, okay? So if your rising is in Aries, your chart ruler is Mars, and Mars is right here. You might recognize this as the male symbol because Mars is the masculine planet. Mars, you are going to be very penetrative in those houses. You're going to be after it in a very aggressive level. You just imagine that you really, really want that house really bad. You're really aggressively after it. Like if it's in the 4th house, you're aggressively looking for your home. You know, if it's in the 11th house, you're aggressively gonna be following your dreams. That's the energy of your personality. Now, if your rising is Taurus, your chart ruler is Venus, and you might recognize Venus as the female symbol. This will be about the things that you desire, what you want. It can almost become a need in those places to be blessed. Well, I'm surrounded by beautiful things in this house. The very best of this house is given to me, and you would desire to receive that. Now, if your rising is in Gemini, it looks like this. The ruler of Gemini is Mercury, so your chart ruler is Mercury. Mercury looks like a little devil to me. Now, interesting, Mercury is actually the trickster god. It's actually very aligned with Loki from Thor. So I just think like it's very fitting that it's got little devil horns because it's a little devil. Liar without a hair dryer. Anyway, we're in a Mercury year right now. 2021 is a Mercury year. Then Mercury is about communicating. So you're going to be very expressive mentally, thinking a lot, speaking through that energy. Now, if your rising is Cancer, your chart ruler is going to be the moon, which looks like a legit moon. The moon is the second luminary as it reflects. And so you're very reflective in these houses, and you're going to be taking in a lot more energy than you're pushing out. So even when the moon's in the 1st house, even though you are going to be the first one to do something, you ram your head into it, you're also going to be very reflective about how you're doing that and very feeling and probably speaking a lot about those feelings, because the moon is going to feel that house completely and express through feeling. If your rising is Leo, your chart ruler is going to be the sun. Now the sun looks like a donut because Leo likes to have fun and is a kid and loves donuts, because every kid loves donuts. If your chart ruler is the sun, this is going to be about your essence and expression. And so you're definitely much more likely to want to draw sunshine into your life and happiness, even if it's in the 8th house or the 12th house. There's definitely a desire to be seen, because the sun is also a star. It wants to shine. If your rising is Virgo, your chart ruler is Mercury, again, the little devil. You are the dark side of that Mercury energy. Maybe if we discover a new planet, Virgo will get it. Same with Libra here, because Libra is ruled by Venus. So if your rising is Libra, your chart ruler is also Venus, the feminine sign. Now, if your rising is Scorpio, I will look at it and say that your chart ruler is Pluto. Pluto looks like a P here if you're using astro.com. It also has other little glyphs that it can look like. You can Google those. Other astrologers who don't use Pluto might tell you that it is Mars. Its co-ruler, or its former older ruler, is Mars. So the masculine sign right here is Mars. Now, if your chart ruler is Pluto, Pluto is the planet of control and power and transformation. And this would be about you deeply understanding the energy of that house and wanting to transform it for the best. You might have a cycle of death and rebirth in those houses in order for them to become better and for you to grow better in this. You feel like you change a lot. Even within that house, you might start off at the lowest octave or the lowest vibration of that house and then grow a lot bigger. If your rising is Sagittarius, your chart ruler is going to be Jupiter. So Jupiter is a little plus sign and like a 2 with a plus on it because it's like 2 plus. You do one thing and then you move 2 spaces. It's like a lucky 2 space card on Candyland. So your turn, instead of moving 1 space, you move 2. So if your chart ruler is Jupiter, this is expansive. You will have a philosophical approach to every house, wherever that house is that your chart ruler is expressing itself in. So if it is expressing itself out in this 6th house, you will have a more philosophical view of your goals and attitude towards that, and will be bringing even a lot of more spirituality in some cases in that energy to whatever house it is in. If your rising is Capricorn, then your chart ruler is Saturn. Now, I always look at Saturn like just responsibility, and it looks to me like a cross on a hill, which, you know, biblically, the cross on the hill, but it's also just where, you know, they killed people back in the day. So Saturn's like that. You work really hard, they kill you for it anyway. Okay, your chart ruler is Saturn. You will find that you are very restrictive in that energy. You're more observant. You're working really hard to make this energy flow well. It's actually not even about flow, as long as you're working it out and compartmentalizing it and making sure that all of your attention is on it to make it work well so the rest of your chart can flourish. And no matter where you are, if you're ruled by Saturn, you are naturally career oriented. No matter what house it's in, you're always going to be looking for that house to better your career. So then Aquarius is an air sign, even though it looks like a water sign. Am I getting basic enough for you? I'm sorry if I'm also just a little bit too basic for other people. We're all at different skill levels here, people. Okay, so Aquarius is an air sign. It's the water bearer. He's a breathing, living person who holds water. It's not a water sign. That's Aquarius. He's like holding the water. I know it gets confusing, but your ruler, your chart ruler, would be Uranus right here. Now Uranus looks like a literal like asshole, like it's like a butt with like an anus. That's legit. That's how I remember it. So you remember it any other way. Some people really prefer to say Uranus, and I'm like, I've actually looked it up. There's no proper way to say it. So me saying Uranus shouldn't really be pissing anybody off. Now, Aquarius used to be ruled by Saturn. So you could say the co-rulership is Saturn. I will always look for Uranus. Other astrologers will look for Saturn. So here is Saturn, again, that cross on a hill. I don't do that, but you might want to. Uranus is kind of like Wheel of Fortune energy. It's also the highest octave of Mercury. So it's a lot of knowledge and bringing in information into these houses. And so whatever that chart ruler is falled into, you could say that you might be an encyclopedia of that house, just bringing forth that information. Also, because of that Wheel of Fortune energy that it does have, you might have great gains and then great losses in these houses as well. This is your practice, not mine. Okay, then we got Pisces. If your rising is Pisces like mine, your chart ruler is Neptune, and it literally looks like Poseidon's, trident. Again, this is the new ruler. The old ruler is Jupiter. This 2+, Candyland spaces instead of 1. Now, if your chart ruler is Neptune, Neptune is this illusion, and it has no boundaries. It dissolves things. So wherever Neptune is, in whatever house, you could feel like you really are trying to figure out your own personality in this house, what you really want from this house, and sometimes you can feel super elusive, like you can't even touch it. And so in that energy, it's hard for you to figure out what's actually going on there. And so you tend to follow a more spiritual approach to that house than an actual physical concrete version of that. That is all of how you're going to find your chart rulers. Now you got the planet. You can see the numbers really easily. If yours falls in the first, right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, something that you guys will ask. So I'm gonna say it here, is like, here's the number in the middle. Does that number take up this entire spot? Yes, it does. There it goes. And it doesn't matter if it's in the sign or not. We're just looking for it if it's in the house. As you could see with Marilyn's chart, hers falls right on the line, okay? It's 10 degrees. You can count 10 degrees Gemini. It falls right here. If yours falls on the line or even like a degree before, read it in the next house, because that will give you the better energy. It's pulling into the next house. It always is. I would give it even more energy if it's on the rising sign, the descendant, the midheaven, or in the nadir here, the ICMC, ACDC. This is so much extra energy. So if it's 5 degrees in the 12th house, you could also read it in the first because of the rising sign having so much energy. Same over here. If it's 5 degrees underneath the descendant, I actually call that the sweet spot because it's very shadowed over. You would read it in the 7th. Same here. You know, this 5 degrees up here, read it in the 10th. And down here, if it's 5 degrees in the 3rd house, read it in the 4th. That's my rule of thumb. Other astrologers have seen things a little bit differently. It's a pretty common understanding of reading these houses. You read the energy in the next one if it is close enough. So give yourself a little bit more extra if it's in one of the cardinal houses, because these are very important houses to you. Now that we got all of that accomplished, let's get into your chart ruler. So if your chart ruler falls in the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd house, you are in quadrant 1. The first quadrant is the awareness of self. All 3 of these houses are about you. So there's a lot more attention drawn to you and the things that you will be doing. They can be self-developed, self-centered, and very independent, okay? So if your chart ruler falls through there, you're going to have that across the board, whether it's the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. Now, if you are in the 1st house, this is the house of self, body, and identity. People with their chart ruler in the 1st house normally have extra self-confidence, or at the very least, no problem initiating. The thing that you're going to be looking out for is you. So even if you have low confidence or insecurities, it does not mean that you can't just go out and protect yourself anyway. You're always going to be looking after yourself. Usually someone with their chart ruler in the 1st takes care of themselves, doesn't really know how to take care of anybody else, and doesn't really want to be around that energy. Very self-sufficient, probably grew up making sure they were self-sufficient. This could mean that their parents were absent or distant, or that their parents put responsibility on them or taught them self-love, self-care, and to really be one with their identity. So that's the energy that you would have if your chart ruler is in the 1st. Now, if your chart ruler is in the 2nd house, now we are dealing with money, possessions, and value. Value is the best word I've ever heard for the 2nd, because a lot more real, true self-confidence comes from the 2nd, okay? Say the 1st house, you could go forward confidently, but there's this insecurity that can happen too, with maybe not even knowing if you have value nor caring. As soon as you get to the 2nd, this is when you start questioning your value in this world. So a chart ruler in the 2nd, you might have a lot of desires to know whether or not you are important. You're going to start to get into what is more of your purpose and your value in your place in this world, because it's also Earth, and Earth trines up to the midheaven point, which is our place of self-actualization. Your number one thing you're going to be looking for is stability, and whether that's through money, through what kind of home you have, the quality of your items, or how beautiful you are, in order to gain yourself a rich mate. All of that energy falls into the 2nd. How much value do you have in this world? And that can also mean if we're a self-focused society that's looking towards beauty, and you have your chart ruler in the 2nd, beauty might be very important to you to make you feel like, okay, yes, I would never leave without looking my best, because my place in this world depends on how beautiful I am, because that's where my value lies. Now I'll say it's the third house. The third house of communication, siblings, running errands, and actually your neighborhood. Something I've seen about anybody with their chart ruler in the third is that they are like a big fish in a little pond, and they are cool with that, okay? If their energy lies in the third, they definitely are fixated on where they came from, because it's that community they were born in. Now it's also communication and siblings, so it's a desire to be close to them. Now if this chart ruler is afflicted, you know, say that it's like square Mars or something, you might have a lot of problems with your siblings. But I've seen that mostly, even if you have problems with your siblings, there's still this desire to be close to them in some way, shape, or form. I've seen someone I know with their chart ruler in the third. It was from a religion where the parents can disown if their children leave the church. And so her and her brother were really close because both their parents, you know, disowned them when they decided to leave the church at different times in their life. What I've also seen about you, so if you have that, your chart ruler in the third, you have a very fiery personality and you're fun. Like it's something that you like to do. You like to communicate. You have a lot of thoughts going. You're not really thinking even philosophically as much as you're thinking about being in the here and now, and how you can explore this energy and make the most of it. Since it is naturally ruled by Mercury, it's a lot about what you think. What do you think of yourself? What do you think of other people? What are you thinking about? And then you want to explore that and express that in any way that you possibly can. If your chart ruler falls in the fourth, fifth, or sixth houses, you're in the quadrant of integrating yourself with your environment. This is when you start to develop your own awareness outside of yourself. So you start to understand family, your own children, coworkers. You want to know about what you feel and what you will do in this lifetime. Your chart ruler is in the fourth house. That's of home, family, and property. This is where you really are going to be asking yourself, what do you feel? What do you feel about that? How does that make you feel? Why am I crying? What am I feeling? What is happening? Am I happy? I don't know. That's all of that energy that you're going to get there. With the fourth house, 4 is also a number of building. And so there's the desire to build your house on a rock and to have stability and security in a similar fashion as the second house. Really wanting to build a practical ground in order for you to live the rest of your life. I do notice that people with their chart ruler in the fourth are so aware of their inner and emotional surroundings that they do end up succeeding a lot more in life, because if you can take care of your home, then the rest of your chart just kind of flourishes from there, right? Take care of the root, let the branches grow. And that's where you are when you have your chart ruler in the fourth house. Now, if your chart ruler is in the fifth house, this is the house of children, pleasure, fun, creativity, and sex, but like fun sex. If your chart ruler is in the fifth, you are very bold and you desire to make the first move, because this is the house of I will. I will do these things. I will, I'm gonna, I will. I said I would, so I'm gonna. And why? Because you're not really thinking about the ramifications of it or the repercussions. And this can actually get you in a bad place sometimes, maybe a little bit backtracking, but you're looking, it's a fiery house. The way that the first house is your identity and you are gonna go things like confidently. The fifth house is also, there's a confidence about it, but in a much more creative fashion, like delivering your gifts to the world, being like, I've never made a movie before, I can do that. And going off and doing that because you desire the creative spark to ignite you and to go off and to do these things. You might also have a strong desire to be around children, and you might even have a lot of memories about your childhood, good or bad, depending on if it's afflicted. But children are a huge part of the fifth house chart ruler person. Okay, now in the sixth house is the house of, well, small animals, injuries, coworkers, the mundane parts of life, your daily activities. If your chart ruler is in the sixth, you will care a lot about your health, because injuries are a part of this. If you have anything going, like transiting your sixth house in general, there's a big problem with injuries happening, problems with your health. Like, people get really afraid of big 6th house transits. Now, if your chart ruler is in the 6th, then you are always very focused on making sure those things don't happen. It will also make you very goal oriented. You would like lists, you like details, you'd like to organize, and that's perfectly fine. And if when you do that, then the rest of your chart actually works really well. Because this is the other earth house that trines up to the midheaven, setting goals helps you self-actualize. So you're reaching this point where you get to build your house on, one corner of the triangle. That gives you a lot of stability. So people with their chart ruler in the 6th, they're not as boring as it might seem, because the 6th house seems boring, because it does, but they actually can be really successful, and they're types who, they can make people jealous, envious of their sort of, not work ethic, but their ability to say that they're going to do something and actually get it done. They have that strong understanding of how to do things in a day to make it work. Now, it's also would be the house of I analyze, like Virgo. I'm going to analyze this situation, and I'm going to figure out the best way to do it. As someone with their chart ruler in the 6th isn't going to just like head first into a situation, maybe like if their chart ruler is in the 1st, and like run into walls. They're going to like sit back, look at the situation, write some things down, and then do it the most effective way. I mean, you probably really value animals around you, like having cats, dogs, small animals, the ones that you keep as pets to, enjoy your time with. Now, if your chart ruler is in the 7th, 8th, or 9th, it is in the 3rd quadrant of awareness of others. This is where you start developing awareness of relationships, close intimacy, the awareness of what makes a society work, philosophy, etc. If your chart ruler then falls in the 7th house, which is the 1st house of the 3rd quadrant, you are in the house of long-term relationships, partnerships, and contracts. I say long-term relationships, that's like marriage, but it could also be a common law relationship or a common law marriage. So if your chart ruler is there, you could say that you really do have a desire to be married. Like, you have a desire to be in a committed relationship. There's something pulling you to there. But the main thing that I would see is that you want to release yourself onto someone else, out into the world. The 7th house is a public house. It's also the house of public enemies. And so you might feel that if you like someone, and if you hate someone, and if they like you, and if they hate you, because it's all pretty much out in the open. You're living yourself outside of self. You're seeing yourself with everybody else, not just by you. This can also mean that you wait a little bit. If the 1st house is your opposite and the 1st house is gonna go for it first, you're not. That's not you. You will observe and report. You might even seem to have some impossible beliefs. The beliefs that if you could just go out and do this, that this could happen. Just because it is this external house and it's like it's driving you. If your chart ruler is in the 7th house, you could be someone who ends up famous just because of your desire to believe in the impossible and to make those things true. Find people who can work with you, partner with you, and help make your dreams a reality. Now, if your chart ruler is in the 8th, 8th house is about shared finances, value in other people. It's the death and taxes house, and it's also the biggest point in sexual intimacy. We'd also say this is where psychology happens and control of another person. This is where you balance the spiritual with the practical, also the physical with the emotional. The 8th house is all about getting things on a physical level into a more spiritual level and vice versa. So you're bringing things out into the open. This is where we can get psychology from, where you could keep these dark, closed memories and how through therapy, you can get them out into the open. They can start making sense. They can become a reality where they might have been a repressed memory. This is also where you choose to stay with somebody forever, even if they dump a lot of baggage on you. The 8th house is about balance between two people, even emotional balance. See, this is a little bit different than the 7th house, where the 7th house are two people standing side by side, working next to each other. The 8th house is when you start to connect. And so if your chart ruler is there, you really do want to connect and you're interested. The 8th house also rules occult, so you could be into very dark things and want to attach yourself emotionally and even manipulate your way into other people's lives because of how that energy is working there and playing out. So if your chart ruler is in the 8th house, you could say that you have a very strong desire to get to the darkest, deepest places and pull things out to the surface. But also, you have the tendency to take what's on the surface and put it down into the darkest, deepest places, like a circle of life. But this is your cycle that you fall on, which causes you to be a very intense person and to live your life with a lot of intensity. Now, the ninth house is about higher education, higher consciousness, and even your belief systems like religion, but also foreign travel, because it's opposite the third house. So the third house is you running errands, the ninth house is you traveling abroad. And therefore, having your chart ruler there means that you play out your personality in a very anywhere but here type of way. Okay. Also, it can be a little bit holier than thou and know-it-all-ish when that kind of comes out. Not hating on you guys, I'm just stating. And this can come across as being a negative person to be around because you're so philosophical. You're almost like, well, I don't care. Well, it's not going to work out anyway. It doesn't matter. Who cares? There's bigger things in the world. If your chart ruler is in the ninth, you can seem to brush off big, horrible things as like, whatever. Things happen, shit happens. In almost even a humorous way. I've seen a lot of people with their chart ruler in the ninth who are very, very funny. You wonder while you wander. You want to go places. You want to see things. You want to believe in something that's bigger than you, and you will. It's also a house of fame. And so you could have major aspirations where you're not holding on or connected to any part of you from where you were born. You're after something different, and you're an achiever. Because of that higher education, higher consciousness, you want to achieve. It's that racehorse driving you to the finish line, pushing you out there. It is that final fire sign after the first and the fifth house. And so it is about achieving and conquering over things and winning. So if your chart ruler is in the ninth, you like to win. Oh, so now if your chart ruler is in the 10th, 11th, or 12th, you are in the quadrant 4. Quadrant 4 is your interpretation of self with society. This is where you develop awareness about the world, your place in this world, what you want from it, your dreams, and where we go when we die. Where is the afterlife? All of this stuff starts to plague you in that area. You want to spend your time out with the public. Now, if your chart ruler is in the 10th house, this is a house of career, your public image, and who you are outside of yourself, and even self-actualizing. So if your chart ruler is in your 10th house, you are looking for who you're meant to be out in the world, and sometimes everything else can fall by the wayside. You just might not even care about what kind your home looks like, if your room's a mess, like who cares? You're trying to make yourself out in this world. You'll have trouble anchoring yourself down, rooting yourself to any one place. You're not looking necessarily to travel as much as you are in a earthly sense to see your presence expanded into the world. It doesn't only just mean fame, it can mean success or just that feeling that you've progressed the world in some way. You have these very strong aspirations to do that, but you can be very confused about yourself and who you are as well. It can feel like a lot of hard work, like that life's a bitch and then you die because you're consistently and constantly working towards this one goal. For like reference, my chart ruler is in the 10th house, and I found that I didn't like to be home raising my children and everything while my husband worked. I got really, really resentful, and we found out it was a lot easier and better and made more sense when I was the one working and he wasn't, because then my natural state is to be working on something at all times. So I might as well be working on something and then also have the time to put it out into the world to connect myself with the world, because that's what my chart ruler wants. So if your 10th house, your mind, your personality is headed into this place that's almost like otherworldly, and that maybe your friends won't even accept, because they want normal things and you want something that's bigger, and they're not going to get you necessarily. So now if your chart ruler is in the 11th house, this is the house of friends, networking, and dreams. This is about you connecting yourself to those things that you've dreamt of, that you want, manifesting things. You have a tendency to surrender to the divine, or when you do surrender to the divine, you start to realize things are really happening for you. If the 10th house was you stabilizing yourself in the world, the 11th house, you're sort of like a feather on a breeze. It is a natural air house, so it's about floating around, trying to find where you're going. Sometimes you can even feel like, because the 5th house is opposite and the 5th house is I will, this is about you saying, well, I won't, but things will happen anyway. So you can put yourself out there. It doesn't mean that you don't work on anything or you don't work your life out. It means that you are the best when you surrender. When you put yourself out there and you believe what you want, visualize what you want, and think about it and head towards it. It's about thinking, because you know, it is the house of I know. I know this will work, therefore it will. And you put yourself into that. Now, people around you, if your chart ruler's in the 11th, they may not understand you. They might not really get what you're talking about. And so that's kind of a really big deal for you, because they might think that that's a little bit lazy. In reality, if you work too hard, your 11th house chart ruler stops working and you can be really depressed. So it is about you just heading towards your goal by knowing that it will happen. Because once you know, the molecules and the atoms start aligning for you and you can move forward and get the things that you want. But that's where your mind and your personality is naturally going to go. The 11th house is also about influence. It's about heading out into your friends influencing you and you influencing your friends, and even wanting to be around them. You can be very sociable, but also very distant, because you're still looking for your place and where you're going. But you like to have the people around you to help utilize them when you need them to get ahead, to fulfill these goals that you know will come true. Okay, so now if your chart ruler is in the 12th house, the 12th house can be about bad habits. It's a very scary house. People are very afraid when they find out they have planets in the 12th house, or especially if your chart ruler is playing out in the 12th. It can be about self-destruction, self-abuse in some ways, and even just feeling isolated and alone. But when your chart ruler plays out in there, it doesn't mean that you're consistently abusing self, which it could. You could have a negative opinion of yourself and your physical body, because this is going to be the opposite. This is away from your physical body. This is outside of it. This is your spiritual self that you care about the most. But it doesn't mean that you can't do anything. What I would say, when you have your chart ruler in the 12th, you're actually very big picture. You don't pay attention to the minute details. Just like the 6th house rules small animals, the 12th house rules big animals. And you treat the world like it's one big animal, one big snapshot that you can just say, okay, and go after it. A lot of 12th house chart ruled people are very action oriented when they see the big picture. Also, healing themselves becomes a priority, because you feel like you consistently need to be healed and to love yourself again, because you can get caught up in this unconditional fear, which coincides with unconditional love that falls in that 12th house as well. It's like, well, who am I? What is my purpose? Where am I dead? What does this life even matter? You're getting into this fulfillment of what life really means. And so you do carry a lot of the answers of the truth of outside of our reality, and you bring them into you. This is a very existential house, so sometimes you might feel like you can't even pin your own personality down. But if I was going to pin it down, I'd say that you can't pin it down. It's all over the place. It's reaching different things. It's trying to understand why we are, and if we are, can we be happy? And with the 12th house people with their chart ruler in the 12th are the ones who are going to give everybody those answers so that we can be healed. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Again, if you so want to discuss more, I do have a Discord now on my Patreon. It's $2 a month. Love to see you on Discord discussing any sort of topic with other people like you on my Discord. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow with another daily video. Thank you guys.